ama suya, ama juja, ama geja. Origin myths are narratives that explain how a particular reality came into existence. Often, they serve to justify the established order by attributing its establishment to sacred forces. They can be broken down into two categories, cosmogonic and non-cosmogonic, which I will refer to as local. Cosmogonic origin myths describe the origin of the world or universe, whereas local origin myths expand upon it by describing a specific piece of the cosmos, such as the creation of a constellation or founding of a city. Needless to say, local origin myths assume the existence of the world itself and often rely on a cosmogonic myth to build off of. Tsuyu has multiple local origin myths. They come from different sources across the empire, but the majority of them are variations of the legend of the Ayar brothers. The other origin myth, the legend of Manco Capac and Mama Ocjo, was shared and transcribed to us solely by Garcilaso de la Vega. In all of these known myths, the founder and first ruler of the Inca state, the Sapa Inca Manco Capac, is transformed into a mythical folk hero. Every succeeding ruler claiming the title of Sapa Inca traced his lineage from him. As mentioned, the legend of the Ayar brothers is a multiple choice myth. When the natives shared their origin myth, they included all the regional differences and biases peculiar to their location and Aiju. By sharing a narrative that legitimized their own Aiju standing, they created an opportunity to receive better treatment from the Spanish. At the same time, the various chroniclers such as Juan de Betanzos, Bernabe Cobo, and Pedro Cieza de Leon, who transcribed this myth into Spanish from Lunacini, had their own biases and motives, whether they be delegitimizing the natives' claims to the land or learning about the natives' history to better control them. There are a few common points, however. The legend of the Ayar brothers begins at the Pacaric Tambo mountain, revolves around the actions of four brothers with their four sister wives, and ends with the founding of Cusco. Long, long ago, in the place called Pacaric Tombo, which means Tavern of the Dawn, there was a hill called Tambo Toko, which means House of Windows. The hill was called Tambo Toko for it had three openings. The center window was called Kapak Toko, which means Royal Window, and it was decorated with beautiful silver and gold. The other two windows were called Sutik Toko and Maras Toko. The meaning of these names have been lost. From these three windows came the ancestors of the people and of the Incas. They arose within the caves, having neither mothers nor fathers. From the window called Sutik Toko came the Tampus. These people made their homes in the lands about the hill. From the window called Maras Toko came the Maras, and they dwelt in the lands around Cusco. From the window called Kapak Toko, the royal window, came 4 men and 4 women. They were the ancestors of the Incas and the founders of that mighty empire. Some even claim these ancestors of the Incas were the children of none other than Inti, god of the sun, and Mamaquija, goddess of the moon. Although in some versions, the story is set after a flood, one so terrible it wiped away most of the previous occupants of the land. That flood also made the soil around the cave inarable and thus unsuitable for a home. The 8 who emerged from the royal window were Ayar Manco and his wife Mama Ocjo, Ayar Akka and his wife Mama Wako, Ayar Kachi and his wife Mama Kora, and Ayar Uchu and his wife Mama Raua. The men and women were all dressed very richly. Their clothing was made of finely woven wool decorated with gold. The men carried golden halberds and the women carried everything needed to prepare and serve meals, which were also made of gold. In some versions, Ayar Manco carried with him a falcon named Indi and a golden staff. The obedience the noble bird showed Ayar Manco was what led to the inhabitants of the land deeming him a leader worthy of following. When the 8 siblings emerged from the cave, they looked around for a place to make their home. They walked along through the mountains until they came to a place near Cusco called Guanacauri. There they settled and grew potatoes. During their time at Guanacauri, Ayar Manco had a son with Mama Ocjo. 2 years later, the natal ceremony of Rutu Chikuyu was held, and he was named Sinchiroka. One day, Ayarkachi put a stone in his sling. He then flung the stone with all his might at a nearby hill. When the dust cleared, the siblings discovered a ravine in its place. Ayarkachi then took 3 more stones, and with them he knocked down 3 more hills and plowed 3 more ravines. Seeing this, the others began to worry that Ayarkachi might use his strength to rule over them. They thus conspired to do away with him by asking for a favor. They said, "Our brother, we have left many things of great value in our cave of origin, things that we will need for our new homes. Will you not retrieve them for us?" Ayarkachi accepted the task and went back to the cave. In some versions, Ayarkachi made it rain and thunder by slinging rocks into the sky. And in some versions again, his brothers and sisters conspired to do away with him out of jealousy of his strength. The others secretly followed Ayarkachi, and when he had gone into the cave, they covered its mouth with a great stone. They then sealed the stone in place with a wall made of many other stones and mud for mortar, so that Ayarkachi would not be able to get out no matter how hard he tried. The 7 siblings waited to see whether Ayarkachi would be able to dislodge the stones and open the mouth of the cave. Soon enough, Ayarkachi came to the walled-up cave mouth. He shouted and pounded on the great stone, but could not move it. Satisfied that Ayarkachi would be confined in the cave forever, the 7 went back to their homes in Wanakauri. Mamakora, no longer having a husband, became a servant to Ayar Manco. In some versions, Ayarkachi was locked away due to the excess cruelty he showed both the native inhabitants of the land and their followers. In those versions, the duty to seal Ayarkachi away was entrusted to one of their followers, Tampu Chakai. He was one of the Tampu who emerged from the window Suitek Toko at the beginning of the story. Ayarkachi transformed Tampu Chakai into stone upon discovering the treachery. The 7 siblings, feeling Wanakauri wasn't a suitable place to call their home, climbed the hill at Wanakauri so that they might look out over the lands below and see whether any of those places would be better. Upon reaching the top, they encountered a terrifying stone idol. While everyone was frozen from fear, Ayar Uchu challenged it, in some cases by jumping on its back. As punishment for breaking the idol, he was turned to stone. His final words to his siblings was that they should continue pressing forward and to celebrate Warechiko, a festivity honoring entry into adulthood. Ayar Uchu became a waka, a sacred place for honoring the gods after turning into stone. Leaving the idol of Ayar Uchu behind, Ayar Manco and his brother Ayar Auka and their sisters began their journey into the valley of Cusco. As they progressed, Ayar Manco would press his golden rod into the ground. Yet, regardless of where he tried, it would only sink part way. By that sign, they knew they had yet to reach the place they were to settle. Then, when they were a short distance from where they would build the city of Cusco, the ground yielded and the rod was swallowed up by the soil. With that, the 6 knew they had reached the place they were to settle, the place in which they would begin their empire. Ayar Manco looked about this new land, and not far off he saw a pile of stones. "Go and look at those stones," he told Ayar Auka. Ayar Auka sprouted a pair of wings and flew off to investigate the stones. He discovered that the pile of stones was in a place where 2 streams met. There, he alighted upon one of the stones and was transformed into stone himself. This was to signify that the place now belonged to the siblings, and on that spot was built their first temple of the sun. Ayar Manco then traveled onward to Matagua, an area near the entrance to Cusco Valley, with his 4 sisters. While there, they celebrated the Capacaremi, a religious festival held during the winter solstice in honor of the sun. During it, Sinchiroka's ears were pierced, a ritual signifying his elite status. Sinchiroka also underwent the rite of Warejikui, a ceremony where young men were officially recognized as adults after overcoming a series of trials. After 2 years at Matagua, the 5 decided that it was time for them to seek a better place to live. To find out which way they should go, Mama Wako took 2 golden rods and threw them northwards. Mama Wako was very strong, and the rods went a very long way. One landed in a place where the land had not been terraced. The rod did not sink into the ground. The other rod landed in a field near Cusco and firmly planted itself in the soil there. The 5 knew that place would be the best for them to live, for the land was tilled and fertile. Yet when they arrived, they found it was already inhabited by people who grew coca and hot peppers. Those people resisted their coming until Mama Wako took her sling and killed one of them. She then ripped open the man's body, removed his lungs, and blew into them, making them swell up. The inhabitants fled upon seeing that display, leaving the land for Ayar and his sisters to have for their own. That was the place Ayar and his sisters finally settled. They tilled the soil and planted the seeds they had brought with them from their cave. Ayar taking the name Manco Capac, spread their power over the land, and from time to time he'd go forth to conquer neighboring people. When Manco Capac was well into his years, and his son Sinchiroca came to manhood, Manco Capac bequeathed the title of Sapa Inca to Sinchiroca so that he would rule. Thus it was that the Incas came to be long, long ago. And finally, in other versions of the story, the 8 siblings weren't alone. They had been followed by 10 Ajus over the entire journey. The story of the Ayar brothers is a story of loss, courage, and perseverance. Although in some versions they were instead portrayed as conniving, power-hungry tyrants bent on conquest. In those versions, when the 7 siblings mourned the loss of Ayarkachi, it is because sealing him away cask of Amontillado style deprived them of his overwhelming strength that was an essential asset for conquering the inhabitants of the land. All that said, one aspect to note about all versions of this story is that these sibling spouses were essentially farmers. Wherever they went, they would settle for a few years, plant crops, and then leave. Each brother lost symbolizes the hardship they had to overcome in search of fertile land for their home. The Sapa Incas who came afterwards not only made pilgrimages to the sacred sites within the story, they honored their roots by acknowledging the breaking of the land for farming with ceremonies. From beginning to end, the legend of the Ayar brothers is a tale that has been retold according to the needs of the teller. For the rulers of Cusco, it created a history that explained their social hierarchy and defined their connection to the natural world. For the conquistadors, it was a tool that justified their conquest of the bloodthirsty Inca Empire. For us, it makes for a fun story to learn about and ponder.